Greetings, this is Amy Wentley with Chai Knuckles Knitting, and this is episode 2022-30, the Burchett Cardigan, Back and Union Row. I'm working on a pattern right now. It's distributed by Brooklyn Tweed, and it's written by Viktoria Shewchuck, and it is a cardigan. And it has a very interesting construction where it starts with a provisional cast on in the back, worked flat for a while, then worked in the round with armholes for a while. And so I am going to show you today how I got started, what the back looks like so far. And I'm about to do what they call the union row, which is where I pick up the provisional stitches, provisionally cast on stitches, and then begin to work in the round. And I'll explain to you how I do all of that. So after doing a gauge swatch and deciding on my needles and all, I went ahead and I cast on, and I did a provisional cast on. So you will see that here. It's done in the pink yarn. And what I did is I did a crochet cast on. And I have a video on how to do a crochet cast on, and a link to that video will be in the description for this video on YouTube. So please check it out if you don't know how to do that. And so I do the crochet cast on, and then just go ahead and work my first row into those cast on stitches. And so when you work the first row, that is a setup row. And so let me spell that out for you. I also changed the lighting here a little bit for you. I think it might make it easier to see some things later on. So with the setup row, what you're going to do is, for my size, I knit size 4, I cast on 190 stitches. And so for the setup row, I go ahead and I work that first row after the provisional cast on with my working yarn. And the instructions for me say to knit 68. So I knit 68, and then it told me to place a marker. So I placed a marker. In this case, I placed a green marker. This marker actually, I believe, is going to indicate where the armholes are going to be later on. Not sure, that's my guess right now. We'll learn this together. So it said work 69 stitches and then place a marker. So I placed a green marker here. And then it said knit 15. So I knit 15, and it said place another marker. So I had one match the green here because I imagine that being two sides of an armhole. Okay? So then it said work 22. So I worked 22, and it had me place another marker. So this time I picked another color. This is kind of a lavender color marker. And then the whole thing is symmetrical. Okay, so it was 69, 15, and 22 is the middle. And then 15 is the next armhole, and place another marker. So I had these two match too. They're both lavender. Okay, and then work 69 stitches to the end. So everything was symmetrical. 69, 15, 22, 15, 69. So then it had me work 2 rows in stock to purl 1 row. So that's the back side of this setup row that I just did. And then I go to the right side again, and it says work 2 rows in stockinette stitch. So I worked a knit row and then a purl row. All of this worked flat. And then it had me start to do some increase rounds. So that was right there. That's about this is the 5th row here where the increase rounds start. So for that round, that increase round, I marked that round with a stitch marker. And in a moment, I'll show you how I mark the round with a stitch marker. Let me move in a little closer to that so you can see what those look like. These are stitches marked with the locking stitch markers, so I can take them out later. Okay, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But this was my 5th row. This was an increase row, and so I marked that. I worked 8 stitches, and then I put a stitch marker on the 9th stitch. And I'm calling this, for my purposes, row 1, because I'm going to do a bunch of repeats of that decrease round. Every 10 rounds for, every size actually does that, every 10th round. Okay, so I needed to mark every 10th round so I would know where my increases would be. So that's how I chose to do that. So this was my first increase round. And on this round I went from 190 to 194 stitches. And this was row 1. So it said every 10th round. So my next marker will actually go into row 11. All the increase rows are right side rows. So my next marker goes into an increase round. On the right side, that's row 11. The next increase round was row 21, the next after that 31, and the last one was row 41. Okay, because I was instructed to do the first increase round, which was down here, and then to do 4 more increase rounds. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. After I did the last increase round, I was instructed to work 3 more rounds. That would be a purl round, a knit round, and a purl round. Okay. So I'm now set up here where I'm going to back out again so you can see the whole big picture. For my size here now, I've got 210 stitches on my needle. I started with 90, so I have 210 now. Okay, I still have my same markers in there, but I've got different numbers now. So I believe it's, it might be, oh, I cannot remember right now. I had it on my phone. My phone's not with me, and I don't want to count them right now, but it's still 69 on both ends, but these sections here between the markers actually increased. Okay, so I now have 210 stitches, and I am about to start what is called the union round. So the instructions say leaving stitches on the needle and without breaking the yarn. So all my stitches are on the needle. This is my working yarn. I am ready to start a right side row. And this is, I'm working on my largest needle, which for me is a size 6, on a 48-inch, it's a 48-inch circular needle. It's my longer one. So the next thing they tell you to do is to carefully remove the waste yarn from the provisional cast on and transfer 190 stitches, remember that's how many I cast on, to the shorter size A needle without twisting the stitches and ensuring the proper stitch mount orientation. So here's the deal. You don't necessarily need to use a shorter size A needle. You can actually use a longer, and I'm going to use a pretty long, this one might be a 40-inch, I'm not sure, and this is going to be like a size 1, I think, needle. What does it say on here? 1.5. Now it doesn't matter for your provisional cast on stitches that you pick up what size needle this is, the actual, US needle size, as long as it's the same size or smaller than the needle you use to work here. Actually, it's easier if it's a smaller needle because it makes the provisional stitches easier to pick up. So the next instruction says to carefully remove the waste yarn from the provisional cast on and transfer your live stitches to another needle without twisting the stitches and ensuring proper stitch mount orientation. So I'm going to use a needle that's actually smaller than my size A. This one's actually a US 1.5. So, and I'm going to put the stitches on this needle. Now the reason I can use a smaller needle is because we'll be working the union round with our regular needle that we've been using all along, the size A needle. And the working needle is the needle that actually sizes the stitches. You can have any size needle hold your stitches while you work them. It's your working needle that's going to make them the size. So the needle in your right hand will size them. The needle in your left hand will hold them. Okay? So I started out by taking my provisional cast on, and I took out the knot at the end, and I'm going to slowly undo these stitches and put them on my smaller needle here. It's easier, I think, to work with a smaller needle. So I'm just going to pull these stitches out carefully as I go across and pick up the stitch underneath it and put it with the right leg in the front. And I'll pull the next stitch out and put this in the needle with the right leg in the front. Let me get just a little closer for you. I'm going to undo this chain. Watch how I'm undoing the chain. I just pull. Now you might undo, for my knot, I had to undo the knot with the wrong side facing me. So I'm actually picking these all up from the wrong side. It doesn't matter if you pick them up for the right or the wrong side. If you undo your knot and you're having a really hard time getting your provisional cast on out, you might try the other side and unknot there and try unraveling from that side. So while I pull this chain out, it exposes an empty stitch that I slip onto my needle, and I make sure that it's oriented correctly, and that means that this stitch here, let me pull it out, has a right leg and a left leg. I want to make sure the right leg's in the front, so I'm going to come from behind that stitch to put it on my needle so the right leg is in the front and the left leg is in the back. That's what correct orientation means. So I'm going to continue to slowly pull these chains out and put the stitch on my needle from the back. Notice how I'm coming from the back to get my stitch, to put it on the needle, and I'm pulling out my chain. And coming from the back and pulling out my chain like that. And I am going to continue to do this all the way across my row for 190 stitches. If you get into some bind where you may have knit into your provisional cast on yarn and it gets held up, and if you need to use some scissors to cut, to pull things out, just make sure you use a really sharp, small pair of scissors, very sharp tip, and just cut the provisional cast on yarn. Make sure you don't cut your project yarn, okay? So I'm going to keep at this for a while, and I will be back shortly to show you where to go from here to start the union round. Hi, I'm back. I put all my stitches on my smaller needle, got all of my provisional cast on taken out, the chain all unraveled. The next important thing I did was I counted all my stitches, and you will likely find that you're going to have one less stitch than you cast on. And that's because of the nature of the provisional cast on, at least with the crochet cast on that I use, is that you're actually kind of picking up the stitches upside down. And so you kind of have a half a stitch at each end that you don't pick up, which equals missing one stitch. And so the way to make up that stitch at the end is to one end of the provisional stitches that you picked up is going to have your tail where you worked your first row with your working yarn. You left a long tail. So all you need to do is go ahead and knit that first stitch using the tail, pulling it through and bringing it up onto the left needle like a knitted on cast on, and that will be your 190th stitch. So I'm going to pause the recording for a bit, and I will be right back for the next part, which is the union round. I'll see you then. This part of the video is going to discuss how to work the union row for the body. So just to get you oriented, I have my original needle. This was a size 6 for me. On my original back stitches, and I'm having those at the top of my work right now. And I also have my secondary needle with the stitches that I picked up from the provisional cast on, and that needle and all those stitches is at the bottom. So that bottom needle actually has my original 190 stitches I cast on the bottom, and the top needle actually has 210, just so you know. So we are going to be working the union round, and it's a right side row, and we're going to be using the original needle. For me, that was my size 6, and our yarn is still attached from having worked the back up to that point. The last row we worked was a wrong side row up there. So I've got my working yarn attached here. Let me get that needle out of the way, get some of this noise out of the way. Desk is a little messy right now. Okay, so we're going to start here. And the first part of the instruction, it's a big, long instruction, and it's going to involve some markers too, so have your markers on hand. And I'll be using different color ones, I presume. So the first part of the instruction says, using yarn attached to the back, knit across, for me, 210 stitches on the 48-inch circular needle. That's my big one that I've been using all along. Okay, so all I do is go ahead and I'm going to be working with my, I'm going to continue to work with my original circular needle, and they want me to work all 210 of the stitches from this original needle. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to pause the recording, and when I come back, I will have worked across those 210 stitches on my 48-inch circular needle. So I will be right back. Hi, I'm back. So I've knit across the 210 stitches on my original needle. The next part of the instruction says cast on 36 stitches for right armhole using backward loop cast on. See special techniques. Okay, so what the pattern is wanting you to do is to cast on more stitches on this needle for the armhole. So I was incorrect earlier when I told you that you placed these markers, these increase markers here. I was suspecting that was for the armhole or for the sleeve, and I think I was wrong. It was just for shaping. So this is where our armhole is really going to be. So before I cast on these 36 stitches, what I want to do is I want to place a marker, because I tend to I need to recount my stitches, and I just want to be able to keep track of them, and I would like to keep track of where my armhole starts. Okay. One other thing I want to do at this point too that I didn't mention is I'm going to go back to the beginning of this round I just did, and I'm going to put a special marker. I think I'll go ahead and make it bright yellow, right here about like 8 stitches in where I've been counting my other stitches, and I'm just going to put a marker right here so that I know this was my union round. If for any reason I need to go back and recount or figure out where I am, this was the beginning of my union round. Okay, so anyway, back to the casting on part. I want to put two markers, one on each side of these armpit stitches that I cast on. Okay, I am going to show you the backward loop cast on that they suggest, and you can use that if you want to. I'm going to end up pulling it out, and I'm going to do those cast on stitches another way, which I will show you. Now let me come in closer. Okay, so to do a backward loop cast on, what you do is you take your fingers and you make a loop, or your thumb, and make a loop like this. Notice how the working yarn is in the front, and put it on your needle, and that traps this working yarn between the new stitch and the old stitch. So that's one, and then I'm going to cast on again. I just make a loop and put it on. 2, 3, and you continue to do this across. Now, let me show you something with another piece of yarn, with another piece of knitting, okay? I'm going to do the same thing here. This is just a demo I had from class that isn't anything really except a bunch of stitches in the round. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cast on, do a backward loop cast on here for a while to cast on about, let's say I do about 12 stitches. That's right. 4, 5. Now you can see already what's happening is this is, as I'm pulling, this is loosening up a lot. This is a really super loose cast on. And I really don't like having that looseness at the bottom of my armholes. So just let me show you a little bit more. So it just continues. If we go down to the cord here, just look at how loose those stitches are. They don't have any integrity at all. They're really just loops on your needle. And I don't like that. So I'm going to show you what I prefer to do. It's a tiny, teensy tiny bit more complicated, but it gives a much nicer armhole bottom that you'll later pick stitches up for the sleeves from. So I think it's worth the time doing. So I'm going to take off this backward loop cast on. And what I'm going to do at this point, when I go to cast on the new stitches, I'll place my marker, and then I'm going to turn my work to the back. And I'm going to take my working needle, and I'm going to cast on with a knitted on cast on 36 stitches. So the way you do that is you take your first stitch and you insert as if to knit, wrap, pull through, but don't drop off. You're going to pull the loop through and put it up on your left hand needle and then tug it a little tight. That's one. Then I insert as if to knit, pull the stitch through, pull it out, put it on the left hand needle and tighten. So that's 2, and then pull through, whoops, put up on the left hand needle and pull tighter. These stitches are going to look like they're crossing a little bit. Do you see how that looks a little crossed? Don't worry about it, that's the nature of it. Just come around, insert as if to knit, pull through. My tail really wants to come along for the ride here. And put up on the left hand needle and pull tight. And so I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording. I'm going to do 36 of these, and I'm going to show you what they look like when I'm done. So I will be right back. So I finished casting on the 36 stitches using the knitted cast on. And as I said before, I did that from the back of my work. And so here I have just finished those 36 stitches. And I'm going to put another marker the same color, so I chose this pink. It's the closest to red I had. And I wanted something, you know, that would sort of stand out for the armhole there. So those are my 36 stitches. So at this point I need to turn my work again so that my front side is facing me. And this is what things look like now. This was my original needle. This is the top of the work that I originally did, the furthest away from my provisional cast on. This is my 36 stitches. And I'd like to point out that the number of stitches that I'm talking about here, so I've talked about 100 and 210, 190, 36 casting on. Those are all for a size 3. If you're doing a different size, your stitch count's going to be different, so please adjust accordingly. So after we do that, the instruction says, working across stitches from provisional cast on the shorter size A needle, knit 69 stitches and place a marker. So right now what we're doing is we're going to be starting to pick up the stitches from the provisional the stitches from the needle we put in at the provisional cast on. I'm going to back way out so you can see everything that's going on here. So this is at the top here. These are my newly cast on stitches, and these are all the stitches that were on my original, or that are still on my original needle, all going across the top of the work here. Okay, and there's the beginning of that round. Okay, and this is my original needle up here. So now we've come to the end of this original needle, and we cast on stitches, and make sure you don't twist them. And then we're going to start working off the provisional needle down here. And what we want to do is we want to pick that up so that our right side of the work, the public side of the work, is facing us. And we're going to have our original needle with our newly cast on stitches in our right hand, and the provisional needle with the stitches we picked up from the provisional cast on in our left hand. And my marker fell off. I want to have the marker at the end of these cast on stitches here, and I'm going to start working right here 69 stitches before I place a marker. Okay, so all I'm going to do at this point right here is take my working yarn and knit the next stitch, and that's going to join us to the provisional cast on stitches, and we have an armhole here. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3. And so as I explained earlier in the video, I used a smaller needle to pick up my stitches from the provisional cast on. It's a size 1.5, but this stitch, the bigger needle in my right hand, is sizing the stitches, so I'm good. So I'm up to 4 stitches now, and I have to get to 69, so I'm not going to bore you with that. We're going to pause again for a second, and when I get those 69 stitches worked, I'll be back. Hi, I'm back. So I finished working the 69 stitches off my smaller needle, and I want to place a marker. And what I'm going to do is, if I look at my work here, this is kind of coming around in a circle here. If I pull this down, this is my original needle down here, and I had 2 markers down here for increases, and I think I'm going to use the same color there. So I'm going to go ahead and put 2 purple markers. So at the end of 69, I do this. Okay. And now it says, the next thing in the instructions says, let me pull stitches up a little bit here. Okay, 69 stitches and place a marker. I've done that. And then it says knit 22 stitches and place a marker. So this might start to sound familiar to you because when we started at the very beginning, we did a setup row where we placed markers because we cast on 190 stitches, and the first setup row we placed markers, and these are the stitches we picked up with the provisional cast on, which was 190 stitches, and we're placing markers in exactly the same place as we did back then because those are going to be increase areas. So I'm going to do 15 here and place a marker. And then the next instruction says knit 22 and place a marker. I might have said 22 earlier for that last group. So it was 69, 15. This is 22. So this is kind of between those increase areas. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've noticed too that some of these stitches that I picked up from the provisional cast on are actually split a bit, and that's just from, you know, trying to pick around the provisional cast on and all that. So I'm supposing after this section I won't be running into that as much. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and then I need to place markers again. So I'm going to use green ones like I used in this section at the beginning. So let me get a couple of green markers. Okay, so 1, and then it's going to be knit 15 again and place a marker. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I split that, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Another green marker. And then it says knit 69 stitches. And so that's going to actually take me to the end of this this needle I used to pick up my provisional stitches. So I will go ahead and I am going to work to the end of that needle, the smaller needle, and then we will come back here and I will tell you what's next. Okay, I'm back. So I finished working the rest of the stitches on off of the needle that I picked up the provisional cast on with. So this needle's empty now, so I can get rid of it. And this is my original needle. Everything is on that original 48-inch size A needle. And so the next instruction says to cast on 36 stitches again. So I'm going to go ahead and get my marker here and put it on here. And now I am not going to do the backward loop cast on. So that means I'm going to have to turn my work over to the wrong side, get my working needle, and get my working yarn, and I'm going to go ahead and start casting on with a knitted cast on those 36 stitches. If you want to take your marker off, makes it a little easier to do this, but I like a challenge. So I'm going to wrap as if to knit, pull through, pull the loop out, and put on the left-hand needle. Knit, pull loop out, up on left-hand needle. And I can get a little closer for you again if you want to see that a little bit closer. So it's going to be knit, pull through the loop, put it up on the left-hand needle, and wrap, pull through a loop, and put it on the left-hand needle. And you can see that I sometimes sneak in my needle early before I pull it all the way through, just to make things go a little bit faster. But I will go ahead and finish casting on these 36 stitches, and then I'll come back and tell you what to do next. Be right back. I cast on my 36 stitches using the knitted on cast on. This is the wrong side of the work facing me. So now I need to turn my work over again so that the public side is facing me, the right side. Let me do that. Okay. And the last part of the instruction reads, place marker for beginning of the round and join for working in, excuse me, I just hiccuped, and join for working in the round. So I'm going to place a marker and somewhere on here. What I like to do is try to use a unique marker, something with maybe a bead or a kind of fun thing hanging off it. And I actually pulled one of those, and I think it just hit the carpet. So 1 minute while I bend over and get that. Here we go. There the little guy is. So I like to have something with a bead on it, a unique marker for my beginning of round. So I'll place that on there, and then it says join for working in the round. So let me back up a little bit for you again. And this is the end of my needle, and it's where I began this whole process with my original needle stitches. I want to make sure that this cast on is not twisted here, and I want to place my stitches on my needle from this end, and here I am. And what this is it's closing up the other armhole. I believe this is the left armhole. And so I'll put my marker on, and I'm just going to go ahead and knit the first stitch of the next round to secure my marker on there. And so that is not twisted, that's all good. And so what we have here, that's the end of the union round. And so what we have here is a very funny looking business where we have, let's see, this is funny. Okay, so it's sort of this big pouchy kind of thing. So let's explain this. Okay, it's a big pouchy looking thing. This is actually the inside here. So if we were to put the right sides together, what we have is this, our needle's going this way around. This is the outside, and so this is an armhole over here, and this with our where we just ended, where we just joined to work in the round, our beginning of round marker is here. That's the other armhole, and it's just this big pouchy thing. And so we're going to work in the round now like this, and we're told in the instructions next to work 5 rounds, knit every round. And then we're going to start shaping the body, and that body shaping is going to be very much the same as what you did for the back, using, but you're going to be doing some decreases too, but there will be slip knits, there will be knit 2 togethers, They'll be, you'll be doing those rounds, the body shaping rounds, every 10 rounds like you did before. You're going to end up working 9 rounds even, and then you're going to be changing things around on the needle to change where your beginning of round marker is. And so we're going to go over all that in the next video. And in the next video, we'll start to talk about shaping the left and the right fronts. That's going to be done with short rows, so you can look forward to that too. So thank you for viewing this video, and please check out my others. Bye-bye.